Right now, while you are sitting here, something is happening inside your body that you cannot feel. Three processes are accelerating at once. They have been accelerating for years. And the intersection of all three creates conditions that most people only understand when it is too late to act. 1 in 5 adults over 60 will lose the ability to live independently because of what these three processes leave behind. Not 1 in 20, 1 in 5. Your doctor probably knows about one of them, maybe two. What almost no one explains is why all three happen together, and what a single change to your morning coffee can do to interrupt all three simultaneously. Stay with me, because what you are about to learn changes how you look at your kitchen, your cup, and your body forever. Type yes in the comments right now if you have ever felt like your energy is simply not what it used to be. I want to know how many of you are experiencing this. I read every comment. I am Dr. Becker. I have spent over 2 decades in metabolic medicine. My patients are people over 50 who are doing everything their doctors told them and still watching their health decline. That gap between doing things right and still feeling wrong, that is exactly what this video is about. Before we go further, everything I share today is based on published research, but your biology is unique. Always confirm with your personal doctor before making changes. Now, here's the first thing I need you to understand, and it may make you angry, not at yourself, at the system that was supposed to explain this to you. When the guidelines for managing metabolic health in aging adults were written, the researchers were studying people primarily in their 30s and 40s. The guidelines have not been updated to reflect what we now know about the biology of people over 60. Your doctor is working from a playbook written for a different body, a younger body. And here is what makes this worse. The modern appointment model gives your doctor 7 minutes. 7 minutes. In 7 minutes, there is barely time to check your numbers, adjust your prescriptions, and get you out the door. There is no time to explain that the biology of aging after 60 works differently. No time to explain what your cells actually need. So you have been following the advice, taking the medications, watching your diet, and if things are still not where you want them, it is not your fault. You have been doing everything right. The information you needed just never reached you. That is going to change in the next 25 minutes. Now let me tell you about Margaret. She represents a pattern I have seen dozens of times in practice, and her story is going to help you understand exactly why this matters for you. Margaret is 68, a retired school nurse, which means she spent 30 years telling other people to take care of themselves. She knew what to eat. She walked every morning. She took her medication without fail. And then at her annual physical, her doctor handed her a referral to a cardiologist. Her triglycerides had climbed to 240. Her fasting glucose was running high. And she sat across from me in my office, holding that referral, confused. Not scared, confused. Picture her face when she said it, not the face of someone who had given up, the face of someone who had tried and was being told it was not enough. She said, "I have done everything right. Why is this happening?" I am going to come back to Margaret throughout this video, but right now, I need to show you what is actually happening inside the body after 60. Because once you understand the biology, everything in her story becomes something you can use. Here is what most doctors do not have time to explain in a 7-minute visit. The first process is one that affects every single cell you have. And by the time you feel its effects, it has already been happening for years. Think of every cell in your body as a factory that generates electricity. When you were 30 years old, each factory had roughly 2,000 generators running at full capacity. By 65, direct measurements in human muscle tissue show the number drops by 40 to 50%. You are running your factories on half the generators you started with, and the ones that remain, many are inefficient, struggling, producing less energy from the same amount of fuel. This is called mitochondrial decline, and it is why everything feels harder after 60. That is not weakness. That is not failure. That is your cellular power supply running at half capacity. Let that sink in. A 2022 study published in PLOS One, measuring mitochondrial function directly in muscle tissue, found that people over 65 showed 42% lower mitochondrial density compared to people in their 30s. 42%, not a rounding error. Nearly half your cellular generators gone. But here is where it gets genuinely interesting. And this surprised even me when I first read the data. There is a protein in your cells called PGC1 alpha. It is the master switch for mitochondrial rebuilding. When this switch is activated, your cells receive a signal to build new generators, new mitochondria, not just maintain what you have, actually build new ones. After 4 weeks of a specific dietary intervention, participants in this same study showed 37% higher expression of PGC1 alpha in muscle tissue and 28% more mitochondria in those same cells. Their measured exercise capacity improved by 25%, 28% more mitochondria in 4 weeks. The patients who experienced this described it as feeling like they had the energy they remembered from 10 years earlier. That is not placebo. That is 28% more cellular generators running more efficiently. I will tell you exactly what triggered that change. But first, I need to show you process number 2, because this one, almost no one outside a research hospital has ever heard it explained. Stay with me. Because this connects directly to why Margaret's numbers had been climbing despite doing everything right. When I looked at her full metabolic panel, one thing stood out immediately. Her circulating stem cell count was at the very low end of the normal range for her age, and that was the piece her cardiologist was not looking at. Here is what stem cells do that almost nobody explains. Your stem cells are the repair crew for your entire body. Every time an arterial wall gets inflamed, every time a section of gut lining wears down, every time a muscle fiber tears during exercise, stem cells migrate to the site and rebuild healthy tissue. At 30 years old, you maintain a rich, active pool of these repair cells. By 65, studies measuring stem cell populations directly in human blood show a decline of 60 to 70% compared to younger adults. The repair crew that maintained your body for decades is now operating at 30% capacity. Think of it like this. Imagine your body is a large building. For 30 years, you had a full maintenance crew working around the clock, fixing pipes, replacing worn wiring, patching walls before damage spread. By 65, you have 3 people left in that crew trying to do the work of 10. The building still looks fine from the outside, for a while. And here is the critical part, the part that matters most for the rest of what I am going to show you. When stem cell depletion coincides with DNA damage in tissue, which is inevitable over decades of normal life, there are fewer healthy cells available to replace damaged ones before mutations accumulate. This is not speculation. This is established cell biology, published, peer-reviewed, and almost never discussed in a standard appointment. So the question becomes, is there a way to protect and reactivate the stem cells that remain? The answer is yes, and the mechanism involves a molecule your body already knows how to use. Researchers at Harvard and the Salk Institute have investigated a molecule called beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. A study published in Nature by Chung and colleagues demonstrated that BHB is a critical regulator of stem cell integrity. When BHB levels are low, which is the normal state for most people over 60 running primarily on glucose, stem cells exit their protected resting state prematurely. They become exhausted. They lose their regenerative power. When BHB levels are elevated, stem cells are maintained in a protected, ready state. They live longer. They respond more effectively when your body calls on them to repair tissue. The molecular pathway is confirmed. BHB inhibits an enzyme called HDAC3, which activates the gene expression profile that keeps stem cells healthy and functional. Now, I need to be clear about something. I am not telling you to go on a ketogenic diet. I am not telling you to fast aggressively. What the research shows is that periodic, mild elevation of BHB, even modest elevation, creates a protective signal your stem cells respond to. And there is a simple, inexpensive way to trigger that signal every single morning for less than $1 a day. But wait, there is a third process, and this one changes how you think about everything that follows. If this information is reaching someone who needs it, hit like right now, not for the algorithm, because someone watching this video might be sitting exactly where Margaret sat, doing everything right, getting nowhere. This video finds those people when you hit like now. I want to say the next part carefully because precision matters enormously here. In 1931, a biochemist named Otto Warburg received the Nobel Prize for discovering something about cancer cells. He found that cancer cells consume glucose at a rate 10 to 50 times higher than normal cells, and they process that glucose through a fast, wasteful pathway, even when oxygen is plentiful. Normal cells, when oxygen is available, use their mitochondria to burn fuel efficiently. Cancer cells prefer the wasteful pathway, regardless of available oxygen. For decades, this was treated as a curiosity, a byproduct of cancer, not a driver of it. What researchers at Boston College and the University of South Florida have since demonstrated in laboratory and animal model studies is that this metabolic dependency is not incidental. It is central to how cancer cells survive, and it creates a specific vulnerability. Here's what I need to be very precise about. Early research and animal model data suggest that a metabolic environment with lower glucose and elevated ketones may create conditions where healthy cells, which have functional mitochondria and can use multiple fuel sources, continue to thrive, while cancer cells, which depend heavily on glucose, face greater metabolic stress. Human clinical trials are ongoing. This area of research is evolving. I am not telling you that what I am about to describe prevents or treats cancer. What I am telling you is that the direction of the evidence is biologically plausible and scientifically grounded, and the intervention has 4 other firmly established benefits that stand entirely on their own. What the research does clearly support is this: if you are over 60 and your metabolism runs primarily on glucose, you are operating in an environment that emerging science suggests is more favorable to cancer cell metabolism than it needs to be. And changing that metabolic environment every morning may be one of the most sensible investments of a single teaspoon that exists. Let me come back to Margaret now, because this is where her story starts to shift. After I explained these 3 processes to her, she sat quietly for a moment. Then she asked a question I hear often. She said, "So why has nobody ever told me this?" I gave her the honest answer. It is not that this information is being suppressed. It is that a 7-minute appointment cannot contain a 25-minute conversation. The system is not designed for depth. It is designed for volume. Your doctor is not failing you. The structure they operate within is failing both of you. She started the protocol I am about to give you on a Tuesday morning. 1 teaspoon in her coffee. That is all. 1 teaspoon. I will tell you exactly what happened. But first, the 4th mechanism, because this one involves an outcome that conventional nutritional science calls nearly impossible in people over 50. Here is what I need you to understand about muscle after 60. Sarcopenia, age-related muscle loss. It affects 30% of people over 60 and 70% of people over 80. When you lose muscle, you lose the metabolically active tissue that keeps your resting metabolic rate elevated. You lose the reserve your immune system draws on during illness and recovery. And the research is now clear. Muscle mass is among the strongest predictors of survival outcomes across multiple disease categories, independent of the disease itself. The problem with most calorie reduction approaches is this: when you reduce calories to lose fat, your body breaks down muscle alongside fat. The standard ratio is roughly 75% fat and 25% muscle. You get lighter, but you get weaker, and your metabolism slows further. A 2019 study published in Nutrition and Metabolism changed how I approach this entirely. Researchers studied 40 adults between ages 55 and 75, all with measurable confirmed muscle loss. Both groups followed identical calorie deficits with identical exercise protocols. The only difference was that one group consumed 14 grams of a specific type of fat daily. After 12 weeks, the intervention group had lost 3.2 kilograms of body fat and gained 0.8 kilograms of lean muscle mass. At the same time, the control group lost 2.1 kilograms of fat and also lost half a kilogram of muscle, gaining muscle while losing fat. Simultaneously, in people over 55, the researchers confirmed these results using DEXA scanning and direct muscle biopsies, showing 15% higher muscle protein synthesis in the intervention group. This is what the BHB produced by this specific fat does. It is anti-catabolic. When your body detects elevated ketone levels, it interprets this as a signal that energy is available. Breaking down muscle for glucose is unnecessary. And BHB activates muscle protein synthesis through an insulin-independent pathway, meaning you get the muscle-building signal without the fat storage signal that normally accompanies it. Now let me get back to Margaret, because week 1 of her protocol was not easy. She messaged me on day 4. She said, "I feel mostly fine, but I have to be honest. Is this actually doing anything yet?" Picture her tone. Practical. Skeptical the way a nurse is skeptical. She had seen enough patients give up on things after 3 days. She was not going to be that patient, but she wanted the truth. Here is what I told her, and here is what I need every person watching right now to hear. Week 1 is the orientation phase. Your body is learning to process a new fuel signal. You will not feel dramatic change yet. You may notice you are slightly more alert in the mornings. Your hunger before noon may feel quieter, but the changes happening at the cellular level, in your mitochondria, in your stem cells, in your metabolic chemistry, those are invisible from the outside for the first 2 weeks. They are happening. You just cannot feel them yet. Week 2 is when the first signs appear. Most people notice the mental clarity before they notice anything in the mirror. The morning fog that they had accepted as normal aging begins to lift, not all at once, but noticeably. Week 3 is when most of my patients contact me unprompted, because this is when something shifts. The energy feels different. The afternoon slump that used to arrive at 2 or 3 in the afternoon starts arriving later, or not at all. And for the first time in a long time, the energy available for the day begins to match the demands of the day. Week 4 and beyond, the numbers begin to move. Triglycerides, fasting glucose, waist circumference. These are the metrics that reflect what has been quietly rebuilding since week 1. Most people quit after day 4. They feel fine but expect to feel extraordinary. They message me like Margaret did, asking if it is really doing anything. And I tell them the same thing every time. The discomfort of uncertainty in week 1 confirms the process has begun. Not that it has not worked. Quitting at day 4 is like planting a seed. Walking outside on day 2, seeing nothing but soil and pulling the seed out. The work was already happening underground. If you push through to week 3, you will understand exactly what I mean. Now, the 5th mechanism. And this one is the multiplier that makes everything else work faster. And the reason I am going to tell you this changes the first 60 minutes of your morning permanently. You are probably already drinking coffee every morning. What happens when you understand exactly what coffee does to your fat cells and why the timing of what you add to it matters so much is going to reframe a habit you already have. Caffeine increases fat oxidation by approximately 29% in adults. The mechanism involves an enzyme called phosphodiesterase. When caffeine inhibits this enzyme, it elevates a signaling molecule inside fat cells that activates hormone-sensitive lipase, the enzyme that unlocks stored fat and releases it into your bloodstream. In plain language, caffeine opens the doors of your fat storage cells and tells them to release their contents. But here is the critical part, the part almost nobody explains. If that released fat is not burned immediately, it recirculates, gets repackaged, goes back into storage. You mobilized it for nothing. The key is having an active fuel demand ready to capture what caffeine releases. That is exactly what C8-MCT oil provides. It is absorbed directly through the portal vein into your liver, bypassing the complex lymphatic packaging that long-chain fats require. Within 20 minutes of consumption, it converts to BHB, the same molecule that protects your stem cells, the same molecule that activates mitochondrial rebuilding, the same molecule that creates a metabolic environment less favorable to glucose-dependent cell metabolism. And when caffeine is mobilizing fat from your stores, your liver is already running on ketone production. The demand for fuel is active and immediate. The fat that caffeine releases has somewhere to go. Research measuring the combined effect found this. Caffeine alone increased fat oxidation by 29%. MCT-derived ketone elevation increased it by approximately 25% independently. Combined, the increase was 51%, more than 120% greater than either compound alone, not additive, multiplicative. One mechanism creates fuel demand, the other releases fuel from storage. Together, they create a fat-burning environment that neither produces in isolation. This is why the fasted state of your morning, the natural overnight fast you enter during sleep, matters so much. Insulin is at its lowest. Glucose is not competing with ketones for cellular uptake. Fat oxidation pathways are primed, and BHB levels, which rise slightly during overnight fasting naturally, get amplified by the MCT oil at exactly the moment when all 5 systems are most responsive. Now, let me give you exactly what the protocol looks like, because this is where most people make mistakes that eliminate most of the benefit. The first priority is the type of MCT oil you use. Not all MCT oil is the same, and this difference is significant. MCT oil contains several fatty acids distinguished by carbon chain length. C6 converts to ketones quickly, but causes significant digestive distress in most people. Avoid it. C8, caprylic acid, is the gold standard, fastest ketone conversion, well tolerated by the majority of people. C10 converts more slowly, but is effective and well tolerated. C12, lauric acid, behaves metabolically more like a long-chain fat. It does not produce ketones efficiently, and the majority of inexpensive MCT oils sold online and in stores are predominantly C12, because it is the cheapest fraction to manufacture. Read the label before you buy. Look for pure C8 or a blend of C8 and C10. This is the version used in the clinical research. The difference in metabolic effect is significant enough to matter. The second priority is how you start. Day 1 through day 4. 1 teaspoon, 5 grams, nothing more. All processing happens in your liver. Too much too fast overwhelms hepatic capacity and causes gastrointestinal distress, loose stools, cramping. This is not intolerance. This is going too fast. The people who say they cannot tolerate MCT oil almost always started at a tablespoon on day 1. Days 5 through 14, 1 tablespoon, 14 grams. This is the clinical dose from the Nosaka Muscle Preservation Study. Week 3 onward, you can increase to 1.5 tablespoons if tolerating well. The maximum studied dose with consistent benefit is approximately 25 to 30 grams per day. Do not exceed 30 grams. The third priority is emulsification. This is the most common mistake I see, and it eliminates a significant portion of the benefit. If you pour MCT oil into your coffee and stir with a spoon, the oil floats on the surface. You drink layers of pure oil. Absorption is poor. The metabolic effect is blunted. You must blend it. A blender, an immersion blender, a high-powered milk frother. Blend for 15 to 20 seconds until the mixture is uniform and creamy, similar to the texture of a latte. Optional and highly recommended. Add 1 teaspoon of grass-fed butter or ghee. This improves texture substantially, extends the satiety effect, and adds butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid that supports gut lining integrity and gut stem cell health. The fourth priority is timing. Consume your MCT coffee within the first 60 minutes of waking, before eating anything. Then delay your first meal by 2 to 4 hours. You do not need to force this. The combination of caffeine, MCT oil, and optional butter produces satiety that most people find makes this genuinely easy. During that window, all 5 mechanisms are running simultaneously at their peak effectiveness. Now, I need to be crystal clear about who should speak with their doctor before starting, and I want you to hear this part carefully, not as a legal disclaimer, as actual medical guidance. If you are taking blood pressure medication, MCT oil can lower blood pressure further. Combined with existing medication, this can push your readings lower than your target. Start at half a teaspoon, monitor your morning readings daily in week 1, and bring the data to your doctor. A medication adjustment may be appropriate and positive. If you have type 1 diabetes, do not start without direct physician supervision. The combination of insulin deficiency and elevated ketone production carries risk of ketoacidosis. If you have type 2 diabetes managed with insulin or sulfonylureas like glipizide or glyburide, monitor your blood glucose more frequently in the first 2 weeks. MCT oil improves insulin sensitivity, which is generally the goal, but it can lower your readings enough that your medication dose may need adjustment downward. This is good news, but it requires monitoring. If you have active liver disease, consult your physician first. MCT oil is processed entirely in the liver. Impaired hepatic function changes how this is handled. If you are on warfarin, monitor your INR more closely in the first 2 weeks. Changes in dietary fat can affect vitamin K absorption and clotting parameters. For most people over 60 without these specific conditions, this is among the most evidence-supported and safest dietary interventions available. But do not use these words to skip the conversation with your personal doctor. Bring this protocol to your next appointment. Print the references below. A good doctor welcomes this kind of informed dialogue. Now, let me tell you what happened to Margaret. She pushed through week 1, through the uncertainty, through the morning when nothing felt dramatic yet. By week 2, she noticed what she described as a kind of mental stillness in the mornings. The fog she had attributed to just being 68 was lighter, not gone, but lighter. At week 6, she sent me a message. I want to read you part of what she wrote. She said, "My morning readings this week: Tuesday 114, Wednesday 110, Thursday 116. I have not seen numbers like this since I was 52. Her 6-week triglycerides had dropped from 240 to 168. Her fasting glucose had shifted to a range that prompted her cardiologist to postpone the follow-up he had scheduled to discuss escalating intervention, not because things were worse, because the numbers he expected to be managing had moved meaningfully in the other direction." And then she said something I hear variations of often. She said, "I feel like I got something back. Not everything, but something real. Something I thought I had just lost to time. Now." Margaret's results were on the better end of what I typically see. Your timeline may be different. Some patients see shifts in 4 weeks, others need 10 to 12. What matters is the direction. And the direction for the biology behind this protocol is established by the research, not by my optimism. Today, you have done something most people your age never do. You invested 25 minutes in understanding not just what to do, but why your body responds to it the way it does. That difference between following instructions and understanding mechanisms is the difference between someone who gives up at day 4 and someone who pushes to week 3. You now understand that mitochondrial decline, stem cell depletion, and metabolic glucose dependency after 60 do not happen in parallel by coincidence. They share underlying mechanisms, and those mechanisms respond to the same morning intervention. 1 teaspoon of C8 MCT oil, blended into your morning coffee, consumed on an empty stomach, extended by a 2 to 4 hour eating window, paired when possible with a modest calorie deficit and resistance training 2 to 3 times per week. That is not a dramatic overhaul of your life. That is one different decision in the first 10 minutes of your morning, and the cellular changes that decision sets in motion. Begin before you finish the cup. Type "I finished" in the comments if you watched all the way through. And then think of one person who needs to hear this. Not everyone you know. One specific person. A parent, a spouse, a sibling, someone doing everything right and not understanding why the results are not matching the effort. Send it to them today. Not tomorrow, today. Because the gap that Margaret sat in is not rare. And you can close it for someone you love with one share. Next week, there is something I did not cover today, something that may be actively undoing several hours of the protocol I just described, and it is probably something you do every single morning without a second thought. A study from 2023 tracking over 3,000 adults found that one specific breakfast pattern was associated with significantly worse metabolic outcomes in people over 60. And it is almost certainly the pattern most people in this audience use by default. I will show you exactly what it is and the simple swap that changes everything. That is next week. I will see you there.